Welcome to Africa Search for Common Ground. I'm John Machikiza, part of the team bringing you a series with a very different perspective on Africa. The news we hear about Africa is seldom good. Media reports usually focus on poverty and backwardness, war and civil strife, differences we cannot settle among ourselves, conflict we cannot resolve without violence. This series suggests that there is another Africa, an Africa made up of people working to meet the challenges and resolve the conflicts we face, to find common ground. Not always succeeding, but certainly not waiting for someone else to come to the rescue. Each Africa Search for Common Ground program will tell a story about today's Africa, about some of the pressing concerns and conflicts facing its people. Traditional journalism usually focuses on the drama of conflict itself. We will focus more on resolving conflict, people grappling with problems rather than with each other. Our stories do not always have happy endings. What they do have is a commitment to search, to explore, to reveal new possibilities and creative approaches to resolving our differences without resorting to violence. Our first story takes place in South Africa, a nation that symbolizes many of Africa's greatest hopes and greatest challenges. The world looks to South Africa as a model for the peaceful resolution of conflicts, for South Africa stands for the possibility of change without cataclysm. Yet South Africa also reminds us that change is never easy. Violence was and is a harsh reality in communities which have been torn apart. We begin our series in the township of Thokoza, outside Johannesburg. As Nelson Mandela was being released from prison, tensions were mounting between supporters of the African National Congress and those of the Inkatha Freedom Party. This was in fact a war which lasted more than 4 years and claimed more than 2,000 lives. Reflecting political tensions at national level, the conflict in fact accelerated in the run-up to the country's first democratic elections. Today, the sound of gunfire is heard less frequently in Thokoza, but the tensions and conflicts underlying the fighting remain. The former commanders of the armies on both sides, Thokoza, commander of the ANC-aligned Self-Defense Unit, and Wiseman Ndebele, leader of the Inkatha-aligned Self-Protection Unit, have started a dialogue using video cameras that they hope will lead to peace.
These men were enemies in the township of Thokoza, outside Johannesburg, South Africa. Thokoza and Wiseman Ndebele were commanders of informal neighborhood armies on opposing sides. Today they work together to mediate peace in this deeply divided community of 100,000 people.
After my brother was shot and his girlfriend was raped and shot, and the friend of his girlfriend was also raped and shot. It's where I've decided there is no reason for me to sit down and relax while people are dying. Actually, I didn't want to be the commander of the STU, but people elected me in the meeting.
If you are a Zulu, especially from Natal, even if you're a member of the ANC, they always suspect you that you are an IFP. So I decided to stay with these Zulus, and most people who were dying here were the Zulus from Natal, and others, even my relative. So I decided to stand up and fight against the ANC.
The war in Thokoza erupted in 1990, months after Nelson Mandela was released from prison when South Africa was on the road to a peaceful settlement. More than 2,000 people died in one of the most violent and gruesome conflicts in any South African township. Tension between hostel dwellers, mostly migrant workers from rural areas, and the urbanized township residents already existed. However, national political tensions between the African National Congress and Inkatha Freedom Party also impacted on this community. Simplistically speaking, the conflict was fought between Xhosa and Zulu-speaking residents. Before 1990, Thokoza was a peaceful place with ANC and IFP, Xhosa and Zulu living side by side. The bloody conflict, which raged for 4 years, split this community into two camps. Residents were burnt out of their homes if they happened to live on the wrong side of town. No-go areas split the community and continue to exist today.
Kwakunequestion ukuthi empeleni lento kuze ibe ngale ndlela yenziwa yini. Abantu abaningi babezama ukuthi bachaze kodwa yayi complicated ngoba phela kakunama reasons amaningi. That's why nje naye yadonsa isikhathi esithi ngoba nje kwakunganasizathu ngoba abanye bebeza futhi ukuthi hayi akekho wawina, both sides baluza ngoba nangapha bafelwa balimalela baluza, nangale kulaba bhemu kwabanjalo balimalela baluza, akekho umuntu nje oyifisayo lento yayenzeka la.
In an effort to broker peace, members of the self-defense units of the African National Congress and the self-protection units of the Inkatha Freedom Party attempted to come together to form an organization called Simunye, meaning we are one. Simunye took more than 2 years to come into being because of the deep tensions and mistrust between these former enemies. Bishop Dandala played a key mediating role in Thokoza.
There would be a meeting in which, while we were discussing, they would get up and point guns at each other and say, "I will shoot you, I will hit you, you don't know me." And I would have to quell that. So I always had the fear that they had guns and they could use them at any time.
I remember when Reverend Dandala said, let's close our eyes. And nobody was prepared to close his eyes. Because some of us were carrying guns.
There was that fear. We don't know whether after the meeting we're going to attack each other, and we're not prepared to talk to each other.
Each with their own cameras, Thabo and Wiseman began to document the grievances of their factions. The cameras became a tool in the wider peace mediation process that was happening within Thokoza. The two opposing sides had joint viewings of the video footage they had shot.
Video dialogue. Khulunywa mhlambe ngokuthola imqondo noma izinkulumo kubantu ababili, kungenzeka mhlawumbe ukuthi behlukene ngombono noma behlukene ngezepolitiki, kodwa mhlambe especially makuthi abantu abangahlangani, and then usuzama bahlanganisa ngenkulumo ukuthi omunye akwazi ukuthola ukuthi omunye ucabanga kanjani, mhlawumbe ukuthi ungamnikeza lo cassette ayithi ukuthi omunye uthini, umnikeze nje cassette omunye ushintshe kanjalo ekusinje kanjalo, and then at the end labo bantu labo bayathola ukuthi umuntu ucabanga kanjani. So kusekulula ukuthi ungababizela ndawonye ukuthi bakwazi ukuzoxoxa inkinga abanazo. What we did is just we visited all stakeholders, all different organizations in the township like SANCO, IFP, ANC, PAC, even the action area committees and the action area managers, and describe the aim and objective of Simunye dialogue, this process we used. And all of them, they confirmed and they liked the idea. We decided that we were going to interview them on some especially issues, burning issues around the township, like evictions.
In 1996, local authorities began to evict the illegal occupants of the seized houses, and this reignited the dormant conflict, inflaming old political wounds. Video dialogues documented how the people viewed the situation.
I have a house in Section 5. How can I return there when I'm an IFP supporter? How will I return to an area in which I am not wanted, where they still insult us, calling us Mgrembe? The ANC should open its closed mind and build houses that side so that people can move.
For many residents, the pain and suffering of having seen loved ones brutally murdered makes it very hard to forgive and forget. Despite peace overtures, no-go areas continue to exist.
The reason ukuthi bangazi ukuthi ngibuya ngapha and their section eyengane controllers eyengane and ziyabehlula mhlawumbe ama leaders abo, so ngeke ngigarantee safety yami.
Well, basendile empini, but manje ngokwempilo abasendanga ngoba impilo zabo ziyashintsha, ziba worse, bayagula ba.
Abantwana esinabo
The children we have come from homes where they have seen things a child should never see before a certain age. A child will jump over a dead body, or a child have their parents killed in front of them, or return from school and find that a parent has been killed, their mother is dead, their brother is dead, and the whole family has been wiped out. Now this child must walk and go to look for relatives, only to find that they too are on the run.
We wouldn't like them to come and study. While when you look at the situation, our parents have not been allowed back into their houses. Yet, we allow them into our schools to learn.
So, if we allow them to come to this side, we cannot guarantee their safety.
I don't believe, I don't think we could go back to the township. If you try to go back now, you could get stabbed or even killed.
Complicating the peace process in Thokoza was the role played by the security forces, especially the police, who instead of enforcing law and order, deliberately fueled the conflict by providing arms to both sides at different times.
Our community is so complex that we understand very little of what is around us. And this reduces our ability to cope effectively and successfully with our problems. So I do believe that only greater understanding can improve our situation. That is why we have also having the video dialogue, whereby we are trying to make people to communicate, to sit down and to look at some solutions.
The personal working relationship between Thabo and Wiseman became very fragile and was in danger of falling apart, especially when they screened Wiseman interviewing the man who killed Thabo's brother. A mediator, Philip Fusser, was brought in.
There were definitely resistance from both of them initially to show the other side the film work that they have done. And initially there was a reluctance and a cautiousness around, hey, my side have talked on the camera in confidence to me. But in order for us to make the film, I have to share that with my prior enemy. And yet, you had to push your own side to be as honest as possible.
Working with Wiseman, I must be quite frank. I was so skeptical, and I know he was so skeptical as well. It was also difficult. I was not too sure whether to listen to him or just to ignore whatever he says.
I used to work with Thabo, even in Simonia. But when we were doing video dialogues, my mind was opened, especially into some new ideas of which, well, and thoughts of people on the ground, and people, how do they feel, and how do they think problems can be resolved, and in the structure of which they look each other as. So that was a very much important information that I get, especially on the interviews.
When conflict is in a community, it's dispersed. It can't be easily handled. You know, people have their fears, there's tensions, there's rumors. What the camera does, it begins to collect the conflict. It begins to put it together in one room. It begins to mop it up, so to speak. And I think through that process of showing each other their work, I think an understanding of the bigger conflict or the bigger dynamics also emerged. I think it left a question with them as to how could we allow ourselves to kill and shoot each other like we end up doing. Was it really necessary?
When I looked at myself, really, I couldn't believe that this is me. This is Thabo. Sometimes I used to ask myself that, am I doing the right thing? How does the community feel? How do I look? Do I look terrible? Do I look, brave? Do I look, non-entity? Do I look so stupid? Do I look so intelligent? But sometimes I just, satisfy myself by saying that I am like this because of the situation. I never thought that one day it will be possible for me, just to have such a courage, such a, whereby you don't sympathize, you don't feel, you don't have that compassion for the human being. But sometimes when you look for some of the enemies, you go there and I said, I'm looking for Mr. So and so, and if you find him, just shoot him. So it was something just like that. Going to the spicer shop and say, I want a packet of chips, and then you go.
I can't say that how many people I killed, because it was just a war. It was just a disaster. It was just, upside down. So you shoot wherever you think your enemy is hiding. You don't mind whether did you kill somebody or you don't during that time. So you can't count that 15 people was killed by myself or 20. No, you can't say that. I'm sorry for those maybe who were unlucky that were being shot by myself, but it was the situation. And I'm not feeling bad, in fact. I'm just as neutral.
After months of gathering video footage, Thabo and Wiseman and the Simunye project reach a critical moment. Key players from both sides of the conflict are invited to a joint screening of the material.
Talking also about the public viewing, I was under the impression that we are going to have some problems, because when you start to talk about the violence, people think that you want now to start the violence again.
I think the risks were that we were working with live issues, that we were working with real ongoing, very intense conflict that had a long history behind them, and that the film opened up wounds and raised emotions to a point where it couldn't be contained again. I mean, I think part of the discussions, for instance, that we had around how are we going to control the security issue around the weapons for the public viewing is an indication of the shared sense of risk that we had.
Over 300 community leaders from both sides of the conflict came to the screening. For the first time, they heard the other side of the story and were astonished by the high degree of common ground they shared with their former enemies.
The agreement that came out after the screening, it was a positive agreement and encouraging, because both sides were actually looking at some mechanisms as to how are they going to sit down and try to overcome or to resolve the issues.
If there's any contribution I gave there, I think it was just to come in and ensure that people can talk. Solutions came from them at every turn.
The making of the film, the video dialogue product, can never be the reconciliation process. It can be a stimulus, it can be an energizer, it can be a challenge towards reconciliation and peacemaking and community building, but it cannot be the process.
This community doesn't need the revenge, it doesn't need negative attitude, but all it needs is that people, they must sit together, negotiate and communicate their perceptions, so that we will be able at the end of the day to say, yes, we have overcome some of the problems.
Definitely, there is a potential of peace in Thokoza. There is, as long as the community now, they start to understand each other and they start to resolve the problems for themselves. It is. And I hope that I will end up making this township with Thabo as it was before.
The story of Thabo, Wiseman, and Thokoza is not yet over. Even now, the prospect of more evictions threatens the shaky peace. Like many Search for Common Ground stories, this one has no end. As its name implies, our program is a search, and we hope that you'll join us with your thoughts and ideas about the challenges of conflict in Africa. Our next program will take us to the former Zaire, now the Democratic Republic of Congo. We've all seen the pictures of a nation gone to pieces. We've heard about the oppressive poverty of the many alongside the vast riches of the few, and we've followed the dramatic end of the 32-year reign of Mobutu Sese Seko and the takeover by Laurent Désiré Kabila. We'll also return to South Africa to take a look at a problem which knows no boundaries: violence and abuse within families. We will meet women and men who are trying to break the cycle of violence, to turn our most intimate relationships into safe relationships. We hope you'll join us. I'm John Machikiza for Africa Search for Common Ground.